Top 6 Bizarre Weapons. One of the early attempts to build rapid-fire artillery was the ribaldequin. It was a cart-mounted firing battery used in the 14th and 15th centuries. Because their many barrels resembled a pipe organ, ribaldequins became known as organ guns, and sometimes death organs. Far smaller caliber than cannons but larger than average guns, they played a supporting role in artillery bombardments. Ribaldequins were designed to be fired in quick succession with a match connecting the touch hole of all the barrels. Perhaps the largest were horse-drawn wagons with 3 sets of guns on each side, which would have made for a total of 144 guns that could be used against both infantry and armored cavalry. Unfortunately, when these massive gun batteries were deployed, their heavy weight got them stuck in the mud too often to be very useful. In the 14th century, a rapid-fire weapon would have proved quite an advantage during combat. Ribaldequins, however, suffered from a serious disadvantage as well. While the weapon itself could fire, in theory, dozens of consecutive rounds, the ribaldequin still had to be muzzle-loaded. It took a very long time to reload, which made for a long wait before the next volley. Ultimately, they enjoyed limited use. The Elgin Cutlass pistol was both the first percussion pistol and the only combination pistol to be adopted by the U.S. military. It was essentially a Bowie knife with a single-shot, smoothbore pistol attached. 150 were issued by the U.S. Navy to arm the Wilkes South Sea exploring expedition, which went on to both circumnavigate the globe and prove that Antarctica was not a collection of islands, but had a continuous coastline. The weapon appeared in the wake of James Bowie's famous duel with Norris Wright, in which Bowie used a large knife with a crossguard and clip point to stab and kill Norris. Knives of the same style became known as Bowie knives, and their popularity contributed to the Navy's use of bizarre combination weapons like the Elgin Cutlass pistol. The knife, though, was not popular with sailors. Aiming a pistol with an unwieldy Bowie knife attached below the barrel was likely difficult. Also, because it was a gun, it was equally cumbersome as a knife. Developed as a so-called vengeance weapon in order to strike back at London, as Allied bomber fleets pounded German cities to rubble, the V3 cannon was capable to delivering a 140 kg shell to a range of more than 161 kilometers. The secret to this enormous range was a number of side channels attached to the 140 meters barrel. These channels each contained an electrically fired propellant charge which helped to accelerate the fin shell to a muzzle velocity of 1,500 meters per second. Hitler was most impressed by the prototype, and ordered 25 of them to be built at a site at Mai-Moyac, in France. However, this site was heavily bombed by Allied bombers, which forced the Germans to abandon it. 2 shorter barreled versions were later built and used against Luxembourg, where they fired a total of 183 shells, only managing to kill 10 civilians and injure 35. Shortly afterwards, both guns were captured by American troops. The duck-foot pistol, which first appeared in the 1700s and 1800s, was named after the shape of its barrels, which looked like the foot of a duck. This gun could have as few as 3 barrels and as many as 6. Usually, each barrel was aimed in a different direction. The principle behind this type of pistol is one of confrontation by one person against a group. For example, the gun was designed for use by people like bank guards, prison wardens, and ship captains who could be attacked by several people coming from different directions. One recorded incident in history occurred in 1835, involving a man called Giuseppe Marcofieschi. He used a homemade, 25-barrel volley gun to attempt the assassination of King Louis Philippe I in Paris. He fired the weapon from a third-floor window while the king and his entourage were passing in the street below. Although 18 people were killed, the king only received a minor wound. This gun was patented in 1718 by James Puckle, a British inventor, lawyer and writer. The Puckle gun was a huge revolver mounted on a tripod. The barrel was 0.91 meters long with a bore of 1.25 inches. The cylinder held 6 to 11 shots depending on configuration and was hand-loaded with powder and shot while detached from the weapon. It was one of the earliest weapons to be referred to as a machine gun, which later inspired the machine guns of today. However, the Puckle gun was not an automatic weapon. Instead, the operator rolled the cylinder holding the ammunition so that the next round to be fired was aligned with the barrel before the trigger was pulled. The gun could only fire 9 rounds per minute, although that was impressive because muskets at that time could only fire 3 rounds per minute at best. Although the Puckle gun was innovative, it was very difficult to operate. A number of knuckle-duster guns emerged in the late 1800s to both keep travelers safe and murder them. One of the most famous knuckle-duster guns was the Apache, which was used by the Parisian street gangs of the same name. It was a combination knuckle-duster, knife, and pepperbox revolver. Since the barrel was the bullet chamber itself, the weapon's pistol aspect only had a limited range. Other kinds of knuckleduster pistols existed, like the La Centenaire, which was also used by the Apaches, and an American model named My Friend that saw use in the days after the Civil War. On a national level, U.S. law enforcement was extremely weak at the time and highway robbery was common.